I am really involved in, I do manage our employee benefit plan practice for the firm, which is why, that was one of our visions with having integrity be a really big key in those audits. So that's why I got involved with this team. So we started with Entigrity just in January. So we've just been working a couple months with them. But as far as, my background, employee benefit plans is what I do half of the year. My other half of the year, I manage the quality control for the firm for A&A. So I'm involved in A&A pretty heavily, involved in our A&A committee. So it was kind of a good fit for me to be involved with this Entigrity. So one of the things that being involved in employee benefit plans, that we have a close association with another firm that was using Entigrity, and they did use Entigrity during last employee benefit plan season. So we reached out to them, and they were expressing how they couldn't communicate with Entigrity with video or with Teams or anything like that. And that was a major concern of ours, not being able to have those video capabilities. And come to find out, it was really restrictions on their end, not really restrictions with Entigrity. So we have been using Teams for communication, and that has been huge. Being able to have the videos and have conversations with them, and being able to share screens and see what they're working on. So having that technology really, it broke down a lot of the barriers for us. One of that obviously concerned us, one of the concerns we had was the language barrier. How easy was it going to be to talk to, to have an efficient conversation with someone that's where English isn't their first language? And I really haven't had too much difficulty there. Sometimes our team will tend to talk fast a little bit, and sometimes I'll just have to remind them, can you slow down or can you repeat that? But it just takes a little bit to get used to, and it's definitely not a stumbling block for us. Just getting started on that. So what we really started to have them do when I first onboarded them is really help us get caught up with doing some of the administrative tasks for our compilations and preparations. So they were helping get engagement letters done, and just get some of that first preliminary documentation for the files started. So getting the projects rolling. So that's what I had them help with in, the first couple months, is really helping with those pre-engagement procedures for our projects. They're helping with the engagement letters and just getting files rolled forward and getting trial balances entered and things like that. Since then, I've really been having them work on the smaller, less complicated projects. So they've been working on compilations, they've been working on preparations, they've been doing financial statements a lot, so preparing a lot of financial statements. They have been, the last couple weeks, I've had one of them scheduled on an audit with me. So he's been doing certain sections of audits and, doing cash, doing property, plant, and equipment. And so I'm trying to use him as much as possible in our audits as well. So they started in January. Yep. Had I known what I know today, I would have hired them in November, to allow that time to onboard them, get them acclimated to our systems, work out all the technology kinks, because there definitely were technology kinks in the beginning. That way I could have had them ready and prepared for when busy season started. So, and it would have allowed us to prepare our staff a little bit more too. So I could have assigned more projects to them instead of now trying to find projects, in January, February. Going through the process, we were intending to only hire one. And then after we had completed the interview process, we're like, well, we really have two that are qualified. And I said, well, if I'm going to go through and do the training, I'm going to do it too, because I don't want to just do one and then have to train someone else, 6 months down the road. So while it's a little bit more challenging to keep them busy, I'm glad we did the two, because just doing one would have, some of that training time would have been wasted. Sure. So when we started, so we do have a learning, they did start on a different time than our normal associates start. So we had to do some specialized training for them. But we had one of our learning coordinators sit down and go over some of the basics with them. How do you enter your time? How do you access Teams? How do you access our softwares? And just did some general training. So that was the first week. She spent quite a bit of time with them. Additionally, in addition to that live training, we also had trainings that we had previously recorded for our associates. So we had lined up some trainings that they could review online in that off time, when they weren't having the live instruction. Also, from the beginning, I set daily meetings with them, and I'm still doing my daily meetings with them. So I meet with them for half an hour each morning. And by that time, they've already been working for 4 hours, since I'm on the Pacific time zone. So we only cross times about 4 hours. So so we do that daily meeting, and I think that's been really helpful, because I can answer questions that they have, and then make sure they have enough work for the next day. And if they don't have enough work, then it gives me the afternoon to try to find them some other work. But that onboarding process was just training, live training with a trainer, and then some recorded classes, and then working with me. Week 2, I did a simulation. So put together a client so they could simulate a compilation, that they were going to prepare a compilation. So I took an existing client of ours and made it into an example, and had them go through and do a simulation. So as if they were working on the client and doing all the work, preparing the financial statement. So I had them do that simulation and before giving them real work. And then after they did that simulation, then I started really assigning them real projects to work on. Going back, I didn't allow myself enough time to review those simulations before they actually started their work. So having someone to, that has some more time to spend with them would have been more beneficial to them. I just didn't have the time in my schedule to get those simulations reviewed quick enough. So having adequate supervision, I think, is really important as well. So one of the challenges that we have, especially being from California, is that there are special rules for using onshore staff. So we have to make sure that we communicated to our clients that we have are using offshoring people. Yes. For our A&A projects, we have always included that language in our engagement letters. So it was a clear go for them to work on any of our accounting and auditing projects. But part of those rules because we have to comply with them, they can't have access to anything tax return related. So we had to lock down our system in a manner that, you know, they're only right now, they can only access certain, they don't have full access like our associates here do. So we had to do a lot of certain locking down of our files, just for security purposes. Eventually, once we get all of our clients on board and all of that required language is in our agreements, it's not, we'll be able to start opening things up. But in the meantime, we had to use Teams to share some of our resources, because we do have, like, we use iChannel for a lot of our client work, and some of our accounting and our ANA resources are on there. Well, at first they didn't have access to those resources. So I had to use Teams to pull down the resources they needed, so they could access it. So using Teams, and I mean, so those resources are still on Teams for them to go back and review. Our videos that I assigned to them are on Teams, so all the links are on there. I use Teams with them to call every morning for our meetings. That's how we meet, through Teams. I have a schedule in there, so that's where I keep track and where they know to look of what projects are heading towards them. So like I mentioned, we do have only overlap our working hours for 4 hours. So it's important that I know that they have enough work on their schedule for the next day before I leave. And then they can just hop in there in the morning and see, okay, here's some other work that Roxie's assigned to me. So that using that scheduling and Teams has been helpful as well. An adjustment for sure. And we kind of do have a little bit of a benefit too, because we do have offices in other time zones. So really, you know, Pacific time's our latest one, it's our least overlap. But you know, so there's really only 2 hours difference between our offices in the Midwest. So the time difference there really isn't that significant. Of, okay, you know, before I leave, I need to make sure they have enough work for tomorrow, and then just checking with them in the morning. And, you know, so just getting myself on a schedule, that was just a bit challenging at first, because usually, you know, if they were working with me, I would maybe, or working here in California, I would work on getting them stuff in the morning. Well, I can't do that because I want them to be productive those first 4 hours, you know, while I'm not around. So just changing my workload a little bit. So I know what time they start, and then they let me know when they're leaving for the day. So they weren't very good about doing that in the beginning, but they are doing it just fine now. And that just gives me an idea of, you know, when they started and when they'll be leaving. And even though I'm not there to receive that message when they log on at 2:30 in the morning. Sometimes it was difficult to hear what they were saying because of the background noise, because you know, there are a lot of people, you know, in the same room that they are. But I was actually just talking to one of them this morning about that, and he's like, "Oh, can you hear me okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I can hear you just fine today." I said, "But there was one day last week there were, you know, that I had asked them, I was having a hard time hearing because of all the background noise." And once I said that, then it was like they switched on a button or something and muted out the back, and it worked wonderfully. We track all of our ANA projects, and we use STAR as our practice management system. And I believe they just maybe merged with Practice Engine, but we have all of our ANA projects in there. Yes, STAR workflow due dates.
Yep.
So that's what we use to monitor, to for our process for all of our ANA projects. So once I've identified a project for them to work on, I would just assign it to them. And then when the person previous, if like the previous step was, have we gathered all the information? Has the information been received? Then the project leader would sign that off, and then it would show up in their queue that there's a project ready for them to work on. So that's how I assign the projects to them, just like I would they're set up like any other employee in our firm. In addition to that, there are some projects that I assign to them that aren't really at a specific spot. I just need help doing this or help doing this. So for those projects, I'm either keep track of it all in the scheduling in Teams, in that scheduling document that they have to refer to. But the workflow, that's how I assign most of their projects is, through the workflow that we do every other project. Let's see, the other thing that they do, so we do have what we call prepare pools in our workflow system, where we have certain projects at certain levels go through that prepare pool, and they are looking at that pool to pull work from as well. So they're pulling projects that are coming into their queue that I've assigned to them, and they're also going out and looking at this prepare pool to see if there's projects that they can work on in there too. That I really underestimated how much time it would take to being the onshore anchor, as you put it. So, just really making sure that infrastructure is in place before, taking it on, I think is really important. I knew I was going to be a supervisor. I really underestimated it. I'm really enjoying working with them. But yeah, it has been challenging to try to, keep this initiative going and keeping them busy, and then also maintaining my original job duties. Just thinking that through and making sure that there's someone to dedicate adequate time to the team. I have about a 4-hour overlap, but some of the project leaders that they've been working with are in the Midwest. So there's, 6 hours overlap there. Both of the staff don't work the same hours right now, but it really hasn't been too bad as far as the overlap.